Hey guys, this is lesson 1.1.2, and we are continuing our work writing down these exponential functions. And we're making it a little bit more challenging now. So notice I'm no longer giving you a table. So the reason this is going to be harder is it's harder to see that common ratio. So remember, these guys take the form y equals a b to the x, and we need to figure out b, the common ratio, what is being multiplied by each term, and a, the starting point. Okay? And we're going to use these 2 points to do it. Just like if I gave you 2 points on a line, you could figure out that line, right? So points 0, 16, and 2, 1296. So notice, like, one thing you can notice right away, and maybe you noticed this in the last lesson, this function increases very quickly, right? So we're going to study the graphs a little bit in the future, but to tie this back into our idea of taking out a loan and how much you owe is often more than you expect, it's because of this rate of growth, right? So a linear function just kind of increases at a constant rate, right? This function, this exponential function, starts increasing slowly and then gets steeper and steeper over time. So an exponential function would look more like that. So that's why we see a big jump here in our y's. And that's why when you take out a loan, you need to be very careful about the interest rate and make sure you do a little bit of math to figure out how much you're going to owe by the time you can pay it back. So let's talk about how to figure this out. Okay, so this is really similar to our last lesson, which of course you can go back and watch it if you feel the need. We need to figure out A, and we need to figure out B. So A is our starting value, and if you're thinking, well, I already know what A is, you're right. Okay, so we haven't made these too tricky yet. This is always going to be given. A is our starting value, and it's whichever point has x equals 0. Okay, so we know our starting value in this case is 16. So we know y equals 16 times b to the x. And then b, remember b is our common ratio, or our base. And b is what's being multiplied by each time. And notice this is harder, right? Because before we could just see the pattern, and now we only have two y's to figure out the pattern from. Okay? Well, we can use a trick we already know from our linear equations now. Is we can plug in a point. Okay, so I can say I know y equals 16 times b to the x. Well, if I plug in my point, and I'm going to use my second point now. If I plug in my point, I would say 1296 equals 16, and make sure 2 is your x, not your b, right? So 16 times b squared. Okay. So I'm using my sort of standard form of exponential functions, and then I just need to solve for b. Okay, so I'm going to divide it on both sides by 16, and I get 81 equals b squared. So then b, okay, so 9 is my base. So my final solution would be y equals 16 times 9 to the x. All right, let's try one that's a little bit harder. It's going to be the same steps though. So I need my starting value and my base. So my starting value is that point where x equals 0. Also could call it my y-intercept, right? Where x equals 0. So that gives me a equals 10. And then I'm going to plug it into my form, right? So standard form y equals 10 times b to the x. And now I need to plug in my other point to figure out what b is. So y and x, right? And we'll say 5,120 is equal to 10 times b to the 9th. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 10. So I get 512 equals b to the 9th. And then now, notice this one's trickier because last time I had b squared, so I could just take the square root, right? Now I have b to the 9th. So I have to take the 9th root. There's a couple of different ways you can tackle this on your calculator. The easiest way, I think, is to raise it to the 1/9 power on both sides. So remember, like, you probably know the rule that when you have a power raised to a power, you multiply. 1/9 times 9 is 1, so that cancels out. So that's what we're doing here. It's just an inverse operation. The 9th root would look like this, and you can also write it that way, although that's possible to type into your calculator, but a little bit uglier, right? If you're super curious, let me know and I can show you how. So this gives me 2. Now the 9th root of 512 is 2. 2 is a really good base to know the powers of. That's why, so like 512, you often see that like for hard drives for computers and stuff. That's because computers think in powers of 2. So that's how I knew that one off the top of my head. So my final solution, my final equation here, y equals 10 times 2 to that. Okay. And that's it. As always, go back and rewind if you need to, otherwise jump into the practice here. Good luck.